Tonight's story is one that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice and authority. A routine traffic stop. A black woman pulled over. A police officer ready to flex his power. He thought it would be just another day of intimidation. But he had no idea the woman he was handcuffing was not only innocent, but a state lawyer with the power to fight back. This story is about arrogance, prejudice, and the shocking twist that turned a simple arrest into a national scandal. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell, because what you're about to hear is more than just a story. It's a reality that still happens every day, and it deserves to be heard. The night was quiet, almost too quiet for a city block that usually hummed with laughter from the diner across the street. Streetlights flickered, and the hum of distant traffic set a rhythm. Then, red and blue lights cut across the silence. A patrol car screeched to the curb. "License and registration." The voice boomed before the woman even had time to roll down her window. Her name was Danielle Brooks, a tall, poised black woman in her early 30s. She had spent the last 12 hours in court fighting for clients who couldn't fight for themselves. Her briefcase still sat on the passenger seat, stuffed with case files, legal pads, and the weight of another long day. But to Officer Cole Jackson, none of that mattered. Cole was already gripping his flashlight like a weapon as he tapped it against her window. The harsh beam blinded her. She lowered it halfway, squinting, steadying her voice. "Officer, may I ask what the problem is?" The tone of her question carried composure, but the officer's eyes narrowed instantly. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone like her. "Step out of the car," he barked. Danielle's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. What's the reason?" His hand twitched near his holster. "I said step out." The street fell silent. A man across the road, pulling down his shop's shutters, paused. A mother walking with her teenage son froze mid-step. They all knew that voice, the kind that carried trouble. Danielle placed her hands slowly on the steering wheel. Every move deliberate, calculated. "Sir, I am cooperating. But I would like to know why I am being asked to leave my vehicle." Cole leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. "Because I told you to." Her heart pounded, but she remained calm. Years in courtrooms, years of facing hostile prosecutors and arrogant judges had prepared her for moments like this. But this wasn't a courtroom. Out here, on this dimly lit street, he held all the power. When she finally stepped out, the night air stung her skin. Cole grabbed her arm harder than necessary, twisting it behind her back. The metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. Gasps echoed from the sidewalk. "Is that necessary?" a bystander called out. "Mind your business." Cole snapped without looking up. Danielle winced, her cheek pressed against the cold hood of the car. Still, her voice didn't shake. "Officer, you are making a serious mistake." Cole smirked. "The only mistake here is you thinking you get to talk back." The world seemed to pause, red and blue lights reflecting in her eyes, the cuffs cutting deeper, her dignity being dragged into the pavement. Then, as if the universe itself demanded justice, her briefcase slipped open on the hood. Papers scattered, legal briefs, stamped court documents, her official state ID card glinting under the flashing lights. A bystander picked it up, reading aloud in disbelief. "Wait, she's a lawyer. A state lawyer." The crowd erupted. Phones came out. Whispers turned to shouts. Cole's grip faltered for the first time. His face drained of confidence, replaced by something colder, fear. And that was only the beginning. Long before flashing lights and handcuffs, Danielle Brooks was known for something else entirely: her voice. Not just the way she spoke, but the weight behind every word. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, Danielle grew up in a neighborhood where ambition wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Her mother, Lorraine, worked double shifts as a nurse. Her father, Charles, fixed cars in a garage that always smelled of grease and gasoline. They didn't have much, but they poured everything they had into Danielle's education. She was the girl who carried books heavier than her backpack could handle, the girl who stayed behind after class asking teachers for extra assignments, the girl who refused to let circumstance define her future. "Baby, you're gonna make it further than me and your daddy ever could," Lorraine would tell her late at night, pressing a kiss to her forehead as Danielle studied by lamplight. Danielle did. She graduated top of her class, earned a scholarship to Howard University, and from there, clawed her way into law school. The halls of those institutions weren't always welcoming. Professors doubted her. Classmates whispered about how she only got in because of diversity programs. But Danielle never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She had a mantra she repeated to herself. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to be right. By the time she was 31, Danielle wasn't just a lawyer. She was a state lawyer, representing clients in high-profile cases that made headlines. She became known for defending people who couldn't afford flashy attorneys, people who were written off before they even set foot in a courtroom. She fought for the single mother wrongfully accused of shoplifting baby formula. She defended a teenage boy charged with trespassing just for cutting through a gated neighborhood on his way home. She stood by families crushed under a system that too often forgot their names. And in those courtrooms, she won. But with every victory, Danielle became more visible. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a black woman lawyer in a state where power didn't always welcome her presence. She had already been pulled over a handful of times before, always for vague reasons: broken taillight, rolling stop, suspicious behavior. The pattern was too clear to ignore. She confided once to a close friend, another attorney. They don't see my degree. They don't see the bar certification. They don't see the state seal. They just see me. And sometimes, that's enough for them to pull the trigger. Still, Danielle never let fear dictate her movements. She carried herself with dignity, whether walking into the marble columns of a courthouse or the cracked sidewalks of her childhood street. Her wardrobe mirrored her balance of grit and grace: sleek black suits during the day, soft cotton sweaters at night when she'd return to her modest apartment, kick off her heels, and sink into stacks of case files while jazz records played faintly in the background. Colleagues admired her. Clients adored her. And her parents, though aging and tired, watched her every move with pride. To the community, Danielle was more than an attorney. She was proof. Proof that someone who looked like them, came from where they came from, could rise and demand justice not just for herself, but for others. That night, when she left the courthouse and drove home with her briefcase riding shotgun, she wasn't thinking about danger. She was thinking about the speech she had to deliver the next morning, in front of a group of law students eager to hear her story. She wanted to tell them the truth, that justice was never handed out freely. It had to be demanded, fought for, clawed out of a system that often refused to listen. But she never made it to that speech. Because fate, prejudice, and one man's authority on a dark street corner would stop her first. The woman Cole Jackson dragged out of her car was not just another face, not just another black woman he thought he could intimidate. She was Danielle Brooks, daughter, fighter, lawyer. And as the world would soon find out, she was not someone who broke easily. Officer Cole Jackson had been wearing a badge for almost 15 years, but for most of that time, his badge wore him. He wasn't the kind of cop you'd see in recruitment posters, smiling with kids in classrooms or shaking hands at community events. Cole Jackson was the kind of cop people recognized for the wrong reasons: the heavy boots stomping up front porches, the condescending glare during traffic stops, the temper that boiled faster than reason. He grew up in a small town just outside Montgomery, the son of a police sergeant and a mother who worked at the local courthouse. Discipline was drilled into him early. By the time he was 17, Cole had already decided he'd follow in his father's footsteps. But where his father was remembered as firm but fair, Cole leaned toward something darker: control. "Respect is taken, not given," he once told a fellow cadet during training. It was a philosophy that would follow him every step of his career. At first, the complaints were small. Citizens accused him of being rude, of using excessive force during arrests. A shove here, a slammed door there. But the department turned a blind eye. "That's just Cole," his supervisors would shrug. "He gets the job done." Over time, the pattern grew harder to ignore. There was the incident where a young black teenager claimed Cole threw him against a squad car for acting suspicious while walking home from basketball practice. There was the grandmother who filed a complaint after Cole yanked her arm during a traffic stop, accusing her of resisting. There was the convenience store clerk who swore Cole called him a racial slur while writing him a ticket. Each time, reports were filed. Each time, the department found a way to make them disappear. It wasn't that Cole was the only cop with complaints. Far from it. But his name showed up enough times that people in the community began to whisper. Parents warned their kids, "If Officer Jackson pulls you over, keep your hands where he can see them. Don't talk back. Don't even breathe wrong." To his colleagues, Cole was a contradiction. Some admired his toughness, the way he never hesitated to use force. Others avoided him, sensing the simmering anger that always seemed to sit just beneath his skin. He was the kind of man who mistook fear for respect, and he chased it relentlessly. Off-duty, Cole wasn't much different. Divorced, drinking too much, quick to snap at bartenders or strangers in line at the grocery store. His life was a string of broken relationships and burned bridges. He filled the void with overtime shifts, extra patrols, anything that kept him in uniform, where the badge gave him authority he didn't have anywhere else. By the time Danielle Brooks crossed his path, Cole had already built a quiet legacy in the city. He was known, feared, and in many ways, untouchable. The department had shielded him for years. And because of that protection, his arrogance had only grown. That night, when his patrol car's headlights locked onto Danielle's vehicle, he didn't see a lawyer. He didn't see a woman who had spent her life defending the defenseless. He saw only what he wanted to see. To Cole, she was just another black woman behind the wheel of a nice car. Just another person he could intimidate, belittle, and control. And that's exactly what he set out to do. What he couldn't have known, what he refused to imagine, was that this stop would become the one that broke his shield of protection. Because Danielle Brooks was not the kind of woman to quietly disappear into the night. This wasn't just another complaint to be buried. This was the beginning of the end for Officer Cole Jackson. The day began like any other. Danielle Brooks rose before dawn, as she often did, slipping into her morning routine with quiet precision. Coffee brewed in the corner of her apartment, the scent filling the small kitchen. She flipped through the day's agenda while tying her hair back, her eyes lingering on the most important items circled in red ink. Courtroom hearing, 9 a.m., State versus Vickers. It wasn't just another case. She was defending a young man wrongfully accused of breaking into a warehouse. The stakes were high. His entire future hung in the balance. By the time she stepped into court, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, Danielle was ready. She argued with razor-sharp precision, dismantling the prosecution's claims one by one. Hours later, as the gavel struck, she walked out victorious, the charges dismissed. Her colleagues congratulated her. Clients waiting in the hallway whispered her name like a lifeline. Danielle smiled politely, but her mind was already elsewhere. She was exhausted. 12-hour days had become routine, and all she wanted was to drive home, kick off her heels, and prepare for tomorrow's lecture at the law school. She slid into her car, placed her briefcase on the passenger seat, and pulled out of the courthouse parking lot. The sun had dipped low, staining the horizon in streaks of orange and pink. It should have been an ordinary drive home. But fate had a different plan. 7:46 p.m. A patrol car lurked at the corner of 8th and Jefferson. Officer Cole Jackson leaned back in the driver's seat, nursing a lukewarm coffee. He had been in a foul mood all day. A domestic dispute call that morning had gone sideways, and his sergeant had lectured him about tone after another citizen filed a complaint. When Danielle's black sedan rolled past, he noticed it immediately. The shine of the car. The professional woman behind the wheel. Her skin color. Cole narrowed his eyes. Suspicious, he muttered to himself, though she had broken no laws, no signals ignored, no erratic driving. His hand flicked on the siren anyway. 7:48 p.m. The flashing lights filled Danielle's rearview mirror. Her stomach sank, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. She had been here before. Too many times. She pulled over calmly, hands visible on the steering wheel. She reminded herself of the rules she had practiced since she was 16. Stay calm. Stay polite. Don't give them an excuse. The officer approached. Heavy boots. Heavy steps. Heavy silence. Then came the bang of a flashlight against her window. License and registration. Cole barked. Danielle rolled down her window slowly. Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped? Step out of the car. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't protocol. She hadn't been told of a violation, hadn't even been given a chance to comply. Still, she reached into her purse deliberately, retrieved her wallet, and handed him her license. I asked you to step out, he repeated, louder this time. Sir, I am cooperating, Danielle said, her voice even. But I'd like to know the reason for this stop. Her refusal to immediately obey fueled his temper. Cole's hand twitched near his holster. The move was subtle, but deliberate, an intimidation tactic. The street went quiet. A man locking up his barber shop froze mid-motion, his keys dangling. A mother tugged her child back toward the sidewalk, whispering, Don't look. Don't get involved. 7:51 p.m. Danielle opened the door. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she stepped out, keeping her eyes steady, her posture calm. She had walked into countless hostile courtrooms, faced down smug prosecutors, and never flinched. She wasn't about to start now. But Cole wasn't listening. He grabbed her wrist roughly, twisting it behind her back. Officer, there's no need for... Quiet, he snapped, shoving her against the hood of her car. Her briefcase toppled, the latch snapping open. Papers spilled across the hood and onto the street, legal briefs, handwritten notes, her state ID card. Gasps rippled from the sidewalk. Is that necessary? Someone shouted. Cole ignored them. He snapped the handcuffs onto Danielle's wrists, the metal biting into her skin. Resisting arrest, he muttered, though she had done nothing of the sort. 7:54 p.m. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Phones were out, recording. A man picked up one of the fallen documents, his voice ringing out. Wait, she's a lawyer. Look at this ID. She's a state lawyer. The energy shifted instantly. Whispers turned into shouts. She's a lawyer. Let her go. This is wrong. Cole's smirk faltered. His grip loosened ever so slightly, but his pride held firm. He couldn't back down now, not in front of a crowd, not with cameras rolling. Danielle raised her voice for the first time, calm but commanding. Officer Jackson, you are violating my rights. This is unlawful detention. And I promise you, the truth will come out. Her words cut through the night like a gavel striking in court. 8 p.m. The siren still flashed, but control had already slipped from Cole's hands. The crowd was growing restless. A few bystanders called out the officer's badge number. Others shouted for internal affairs. Danielle stood as tall as she could in the cuffs, her eyes fixed on Cole, not with fear, but with the same unshakable confidence she carried in court. And in that moment, Cole realized he hadn't just arrested another nobody. He had arrested someone who could fight back. Someone who could expose him. Someone who had spent her life dismantling men exactly like him, men who mistook power for justice. The world around him was changing, and the cameras ensured there was no going back. What began as a simple traffic stop was about to ignite a storm far bigger than either of them could have imagined. For a few seconds, the street held its breath. The only sounds were the steady click of the siren lights and Danielle's calm breathing against the hood of her car. Then the words rang out again, louder this time, carried by a bystander's trembling voice. "She's a lawyer. A state lawyer." The effect was immediate. The crowd shifted. Eyes widened. Cameras zoomed in. Someone repeated it, and then another voice echoed, until the block was filled with disbelief. "A state lawyer. You're lying. Check her ID. It's right there." The man holding her fallen credentials lifted it high in the air. The state seal glistened under the flashing lights. "This is her," he shouted. "This woman's a lawyer for the state." Cole Jackson froze. For the first time that night, hesitation cracked through his facade. He glanced down at the scattered papers across the hood, briefs stamped with court seals, her bar certification number, her official ID card staring back at him with undeniable authority. But pride is a dangerous chain, and Cole was shackled by it. "She could have forged it," he snapped, his voice louder than necessary. "Could be fake." The crowd erupted with jeers. "Fake? You serious? She's in a suit, man. Look at those papers. Let her go." Cole's jaw tightened. His face was red now, the veins in his neck swelling as the reality set in. This wasn't just another stop, another woman he could shove into silence. This was someone with power, someone with connections, someone who could drag him into court in a way none of his past victims could. Danielle lifted her head, her cheek still pressed to the hood. Her voice was steady, sharp as a blade. "My name is Danielle Brooks. I am a state lawyer. And you are in violation of the law, Officer Jackson. Everything you're doing is being recorded. You will answer for this." Her words carried like thunder. Phones stayed raised, red record buttons glowing. Some people stepped closer, emboldened. A college student in the front row shouted, "I've got this live on Facebook. Everybody's watching." Cole's grip faltered. For the briefest moment, he considered unlocking the cuffs, brushing it off as a misunderstanding. But the thought of retreating in front of an audience cut at his ego like glass. Instead, he doubled down. "Back up!" he barked at the crowd, his hand hovering over his holster. "Everybody back the hell up!" But the crowd didn't move. They weren't afraid anymore. Not when they knew who Danielle was. Not when the power dynamic had shifted. Danielle straightened as much as the cuffs allowed. She looked out at the faces gathering, mothers, students, shopkeepers, strangers who now knew her name. And in their eyes, she saw something rare, unity. Her dignity hadn't been destroyed, it had been multiplied. The man holding her ID walked right up to Cole, his phone camera pointed at the officer's face. "You're done," he said flatly. "You don't know who you just messed with." Cole shoved him back with one hand, but the words had already pierced him. Deep down, he knew they were true. 4 years, the complaints had piled up, buried by paperwork and excuses. But this wasn't a complaint whispered in a precinct hallway. This was a spectacle, recorded, live-streamed, undeniable. The weight of his actions pressed against him heavier than the badge on his chest. Still, he tried to cling to control. "You're under arrest for resisting," he shouted at Danielle, though the words sounded hollow now, more desperate than authoritative. Danielle didn't flinch. Her eyes locked onto his. "You just arrested the wrong woman, officer. And I promise, you will regret this." The crowd roared. Some clapped. Others demanded he remove the cuffs. But Cole, fueled by ego and panic, shoved Danielle into the back of his patrol car, slamming the door behind her. Phones followed his every move, capturing the moment forever. Inside the car, Danielle sat upright, her hands bound but her spirit unshaken. She knew what came next. There would be calls. There would be questions. The department would scramble. The city would rise. And as the patrol car pulled away, leaving the angry crowd behind, Danielle whispered to herself the same mantra she'd carried since law school. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to be right. That night, the truth had been shouted for her. And the world was listening. The moment Officer Cole Jackson drove Danielle away, the street transformed. The crowd that had gathered outside the corner shop wasn't dispersing. They were furious. Dozens of phones had captured everything, the flashlight banging on her window, the rough handcuffs, her papers scattering, and above all, her voice declaring, "I am a state lawyer." By midnight, those clips were everywhere. On Twitter, hashtags began to trend. Hashtag Justice for Danielle. Hashtag Lawyer in Cuffs. Hashtag Racist Cop. A 30-second video uploaded by a college student went viral before dawn. It showed Danielle's calm composure against the hood of her car, and the moment the crowd shouted in unison, "She's a lawyer!" The contrast between her dignity and Cole's aggression set the internet ablaze. "Her restraint is incredible," one commenter wrote. "He treated her like she was nobody. Turns out she's one of the most important people in that courtroom system," another added. By the next morning, local news had picked it up. Anchors replayed the footage on loop, their voices heavy with disbelief. A black woman, later confirmed to be state lawyer Danielle Brooks, was arrested last night under questionable circumstances. The community responds. By noon the next day, the courthouse steps were packed. Protesters held signs. "Justice for Danielle. Hold the badge accountable. We see you, Officer Jackson." Students from the law school where Danielle was scheduled to speak carried her name on poster boards. Professors marched beside them, their voices mixing with activists who had been waiting for a moment like this, a clear example of injustice caught on camera, undeniable and raw. The chants rose high into the air. No justice, no peace. Lawyers aren't safe. Who is safe? Drivers honked in solidarity. Businesses along the route placed signs in their windows. "We stand with Danielle." Meanwhile, inside the precinct, the mood was tense. Cole Jackson sat in the captain's office, arms crossed, jaw tight. He tried to spin the story. "She was resisting," he insisted. "Didn't comply with orders. Thought she was above the law." But even his fellow officers shifted uncomfortably. The evidence was clear. The videos didn't lie. The captain rubbed his temples. "Cole, do you have any idea who you put in cuffs last night? She's not just some lawyer, she's connected. Judges know her. State officials know her. This is a nightmare." Cole scoffed. "So what? Since when do we treat people different because of titles?" But deep down, even he felt it, the unraveling. For years, complaints had slid off him like water. But this wasn't just another anonymous civilian. This was someone the state itself relied on. And now, everyone knew her name. Danielle didn't retreat into silence. Within 24 hours of her release, she stood on the courthouse steps herself. Her wrists still bore faint red marks from the cuffs, but her presence radiated strength. Cameras crowded around her, microphones shoved forward. She spoke with the same calm precision she carried into the courtroom. "Last night, I was unlawfully arrested for simply existing in my own skin. I was treated not as an officer of the court, not as a citizen, but as a threat. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about me. This is about every person who doesn't have a platform, every voice silenced in the dark, every mother and father who fears their child won't come home after a traffic stop." The crowd erupted in applause. Her words ricocheted across headlines, played on every news station, clipped and shared millions of times online. "She's brilliant. She's fearless. She's everything we need right now." By the second day, national media outlets ran with the story. CNN, "State lawyer arrest sparks questions of racism in policing." New York Times, "Lawyers arrest shake city, calls for reform grow." BuzzFeed, "She fought for justice in court. Now she's fighting for herself." Celebrities weighed in. Politicians released statements. Civil rights groups pledged legal support. The governor himself was forced to comment during a press conference. "We are monitoring this situation closely. Justice must apply equally, regardless of race, gender, or profession." Behind closed doors, the governor's staff was panicked. Danielle Brooks wasn't just a lawyer. She was respected in the State House, known for her work on reform cases. Her mistreatment was a political disaster. For Cole, the storm grew unbearable. His phone buzzed non-stop with calls he didn't answer. Protesters appeared outside his house, chanting into the night. News trucks parked at the end of his block, cameras pointed at his front door. Old complaints resurfaced. The grandmother he had shoved, the teenager he had manhandled, the clerk he had insulted, all their stories came back to life, given new weight under the shadow of Danielle's arrest. What the department once ignored now became evidence in the court of public opinion. One headline captured it perfectly: "The badge that couldn't hide him anymore." Within a week, Danielle's case wasn't just her own. It became a movement. Marches swelled across the state. Lawyers marched in robes. Nurses marched in scrubs. Teachers brought their students, holding handmade signs, "Protect Black Women." The energy was undeniable. This wasn't a passing story. It was a fire, spreading city to city, fueled by every phone, every post, every voice demanding justice. Danielle never asked for the spotlight, but once it found her, she refused to waste it. Each speech, each interview, carried a message larger than herself. "I was lucky. I had a title, a platform. But what about those who don't? How many stories are buried because they never reached a camera? This is not just my fight. This is our fight." The crowd always answered with a roar. 10 days after the arrest, pressure on the police department reached breaking point. City council members demanded accountability. The mayor publicly condemned the arrest. And the State Bar Association, an institution not known for quick action, released a rare statement backing Danielle fully. Cole Jackson was placed on administrative leave, but the public wasn't satisfied. "Leave? That's not justice. Fire him now. Charge him." The chants echoed outside City Hall as thousands gathered, signs raised high under the setting sun. And in the middle of it all, Danielle stood, no longer just a lawyer, no longer just a victim. She had become a symbol that the tide had turned. The fluorescent lights hummed above the crowded courtroom. Every seat was taken. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed from the back row, and ordinary citizens leaned forward, waiting for the drama to unfold. At the defense table sat Danielle Carter, no longer just the black woman handcuffed in the street, but a respected state attorney who had transformed her ordeal into a case that shook the foundations of the city. Her tailored navy suit was sharp, but her presence was sharper. She was calm, collected, her eyes steady on the jury. Across from her sat Officer Daniels, the same cop who had dragged her into the back of his cruiser just weeks earlier. He fidgeted, his uniform jacket a size too tight, sweat forming at his temple. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Daniels kept darting glances at Angela, as if she was the ghost of his downfall. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a reputation for fairness, cleared his throat. Court is now in session. The case of State of Georgia versus Officer Thomas Daniels. Angela stood, her voice ringing through the silence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you will see what happens when power is abused. You will hear how Officer Daniels saw not a woman, not a citizen, not a lawyer, but only the color of my skin. He believed his badge made him untouchable. But in this courtroom, the law is higher than the badge. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniels' lawyer shot to his feet, objecting to the personal attack, but the judge allowed Angela to continue. She played the body cam footage on the screen, Daniels barking orders, handcuffing her roughly, mocking her when she tried to speak. Then came the moment he realized who she was. His arrogant tone faltered, his eyes widened, and for the first time, the jury saw the truth, the thin line between power and prejudice. Daniels shifted in his chair, visibly shrinking. Angela turned back to the jury. This is not just about me. This is about every citizen who fears the system is stacked against them. This is about accountability. No one is above the law. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then came a murmur of agreement, a hum of something larger than one trial. Daniel's fate was no longer his alone. It was now a symbol of justice, of whether the system would protect its people or betray them. The trial had only begun, but the tide was already turning. The courtroom doors opened the next morning to an even larger crowd. Word had spread overnight. Angela Carter wasn't just fighting her own case, she was fighting for the city's soul. Protesters with signs lined the courthouse steps, "Justice for all," and "Hold police accountable." Inside, Angela stood ready. Her team of junior attorneys handed her a thick folder, evidence she had been waiting for. She walked to the center of the courtroom, eyes sharp, voice steady. "Your Honor, with permission, I would like to introduce new evidence regarding Officer Daniels' record." Daniels' lawyer jumped up. "Objection! This is a smear campaign, irrelevant to the matter at hand." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Carter, proceed. But stay relevant." Angela clicked her remote, and a large projector screen lit up with Daniels' internal affairs file. Gasps echoed as report after report appeared, complaints from citizens, mostly black men and women, detailing incidents of harassment, unlawful stops, and excessive force. Each case had been buried, dismissed, or lost in paperwork. Angela's voice was unwavering. Over the last 10 years, Officer Daniels has accumulated 23 complaints. 23. And not one was properly investigated. Every victim silenced. Every voice ignored. Until now. Daniels' face flushed red. He tugged at his collar, his jaw tightening. Angela called her first witness, an older man named James Holloway, with weathered hands and tired eyes. He took the stand and looked directly at the jury. "2 years ago, Daniels stopped me on my way home. Said my tail light was out. It wasn't. He pulled me from my car, searched me, called me names I won't repeat here. I filed a complaint. Nothing happened." Next came a young mother, her voice trembling as she recounted being pulled over with her toddler in the back seat, accused of looking suspicious in her own neighborhood. Tears streamed as she recalled her child crying while Daniels laughed. The courtroom was silent, the jury hanging on every word. Angela stepped forward, her tone firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a single mistake. This is a pattern. Officer Daniels used his badge not to protect, but to oppress. He believed no one would hold him accountable. But today, we hold him accountable." Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Daniels, who sat frozen, his once cocky demeanor unraveling. The whispers in the courtroom grew louder, the public's anger now undeniable. Angela glanced toward the jury box, her eyes burning with purpose. "This is bigger than one officer. This is about trust in the system. If the law cannot protect the people, then the people cannot trust the law. And if we cannot trust the law, then what do we have left? The judge banged his gavel to quiet the crowd, but it was too late. The tide had shifted. Daniel's past had come roaring into the present, and there was no hiding from it now. The next morning, the tension inside the courtroom was so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Officer Daniels sat stiff at the defense table, his once proud posture now slouched. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Daniel's face was pale, beads of sweat running down his temple. The judge called for order. Defense may call its witness. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Officer Mark Daniels. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom as Daniels rose and walked to the stand. The click of his shoes against the polished floor sounded louder than it should have. He raised his right hand, swore the oath, and sat down. Angela Carter rose slowly, every movement deliberate. Her eyes locked on Daniels as if she had been waiting for this exact moment since the trial began. Officer Daniels, she said evenly, you've been a police officer for 15 years. Correct. Yes, Daniels muttered. In that time, you've been commended for bravery twice, correct? Daniels straightened slightly. Yes. Angela leaned closer. And in that same time, you've had 23 complaints filed against you for misconduct. Correct. His lawyer leapt up. Objection, asked and answered. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. The witness may answer. Daniel's jaw worked. I don't recall the exact number. Angela slid a thick file onto the witness stand with a sharp thud. Allow me to refresh your memory. Daniels glanced at the file, then quickly looked away. His composure was slipping. Angela's voice grew sharper. Did you ever face suspension for those complaints? No, Daniels said, his tone defensive. Because they were dismissed. She stepped closer, lowering her voice but making sure every juror heard. Dismissed not because you were innocent, but because the system protected you. Isn't that true? Daniel's face flushed red. That's not. Answer the question, officer. Angela's voice cut like a blade. The courtroom was silent, every pair of eyes locked on Daniels. Finally, he snapped. I did what I had to do. You think it's easy out there? You think I can hesitate when someone looks suspicious? People like you don't understand what it's like. Gasps filled the room. His lawyer's face turned ashen. Angela stood tall, her voice calm but piercing. Suspicious. That word again. Tell me, officer, how many of those suspicious people just happen to look like me? Like James Holloway? Like every black man and woman who sat on that stand yesterday? Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came out. Angela turned to the jury, her expression resolute. This is not policing. This is profiling. This is abuse of power. And it is time we call it what it is. The judge slammed his gavel to restore order, but the damage was done. Daniel's outburst hung heavy in the air. His armor had cracked. And everyone saw it. The courtroom was now quiet, emptied of its spectators, reporters, and flashing cameras. Only a few figures remained, Amara, her defense team, and the echoes of a trial that had shaken the city. She sat silently in one of the empty benches, her hands clasped tightly together. Victory had been won, yes, but it was a victory carved from deep wounds. Her reputation as a state lawyer had been dragged through the mud, her dignity stripped in front of the world, and her humanity questioned by those sworn to uphold the law. But in that same process, the truth had triumphed, corruption exposed, and accountability demanded. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters waited. Some held signs that read, "Justice for Amara," others simply chanted her name. They weren't just there for her, they were there because her story had become bigger than one arrest, bigger than one trial. It was about every woman, every man, every person who had ever been silenced because of the color of their skin or the uniform of their oppressor. Detective Marcus, watching from a distance, felt the shift too. He knew the battle wasn't over, but Amara had cracked something open that could no longer be ignored. His heart carried both relief and sorrow, relief that justice had found its way through, sorrow for the pain she had endured to reach it. As Amara finally stepped out of the courthouse, the crowd erupted. She didn't raise her hands in victory, she didn't shout or boast. Instead, she simply nodded, her eyes shining with both exhaustion and resilience. Her voice, soft but firm, carried through the microphones shoved in her face. This was never just about me. This was about the system. And the system must change. The words rippled outward, beyond the courthouse steps, beyond the city, beyond the headlines that would follow. For the first time in weeks, Amara allowed herself to breathe. But in her heart, she knew, this was only the beginning. And that brings us to the end of today's story. What started as a moment of injustice turned into a powerful reminder that no one is above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. Amara's courage not only protected her own dignity but also sparked change for an entire community. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think justice was truly served in this case? What would you have done if you were in Amara's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and stay inspired.